Good morning everybody, I am Sarah with the trains and today you find me at Darlington Railway Station. Now, as most of you probably know, it is the 200th anniversary of that very first journey on the Stockton and Darlington Railway, the opening of the first public railway in the UK. So today I'm going to be tracing the journey of that very first journey on the modern railways. So to start the first journey on the Stockton and Darlington Railway, I don't need to be at Stockton or Darlington, I need to be at Shildon. So that's going to be our first train of the day.
Northern train to Bishop Auckland. Next station stop is North Road. This is Shildon.
We have made it to Shildon. So the journey from Shildon to Stockton was so momentous because it was the first steam train to run on a public railway. It carried both goods and passengers. The Stockton and Darlington Railway was the result of a man called Edward Pease, a retired wool merchant. In 1818, gathering together local businessmen to come up with a way of transporting coal from the coalfields south of Durham down to the port of Stockton. An idea of a canal was suggested, but this was ultimately dismissed. Ultimately, a Welsh engineer named George Overton was instructed to survey a horse-drawn railway.
Mr. Overton's report was considered alongside that of another engineer, Mr. Rennie, who had been engaged in 1812 to produce a survey for a canal. It was decided that a rail or tramway with branches heading off to Piercebridge, Croft and Yarm would be the better option, as well as being profitable for those involved. Meetings had also been held in Stockton, also in support of the idea of a railway, but the two committees in existence were not in agreement. A rival scheme had sprung up known as the Tees and Weardale Railway, which was planned to run between Stockton and Evenwood. Both committees decided to propose a bill to Parliament, but ultimately only the Stockton and Darlington Railway made it that far.
Interestingly, although this is very much the start of public railways in this country, it was actually the 21st railway bill that had been passed since the start of the 19th century. But the difference was here, it was much more ambitious than anything that had ever gone before. The main line from the collieries around Witton Park down to the port at Stockton and the River Tees was going to be over 26 miles long.
Somewhat inevitably for an infrastructure project of this magnitude, it wasn't without opposition. It was initially defeated in Parliament by local landowner Lord Darlington in 1819, as the railway would need to pass over his land. At one point, Lord Darlington hatched a dastardly scheme to prevent the railway coming into existence by gathering money together from his tenants. He effectively tried to undertake a run on the bank holding the railway company's money by trying to exchange a colossal amount of banknotes for gold, the idea being that the bank would have insufficient gold to exchange. He was, however, foiled by the owner of the bank, Mr. Jonathan Backhouse, and some very determined Quakers, who provided enough gold to cover the transaction, and more besides. Just from this quote, I like the cut of Mr. Backhouse's jib, whatever a jib is. The opposition faced by the railway necessitated another survey, this time by Robert Stevenson of Edinburgh, which did nothing to cool his lordship's opposition. Overton was once more instructed to carry out a survey that was submitted in 1820. The new survey seemed to convince landowners of the benefit of the railway as they withdrew opposition, and the bill became an Act of Parliament in 1821.
Pease, however, was familiar with the work of George Stephenson and steam power, And so ultimately in 1823 another act was passed to allow for the use of steam and the carriage of passengers on this new railway. George Stephenson had been appointed to create a new route to allow for the use of steam locomotives. In 1823, Edward Pease, George Stephenson and his son Robert, as well as a Stockton and Darlington Railway director called Thomas Richardson, set up Robert Stephenson & Co. in Newcastle. This was the world's first company set up to produce locomotives for the railways. On that very first journey, on the 27th of September 1825, the train was headed by Locomotion No. 1, which was built at Robert Stephenson & Co. in Newcastle. The train was almost entirely goods wagons. There was just one passenger carriage for the most important of the dignitaries there that day, and that was called Experiment. The other carriages were just goods wagons for other invited guests, and indeed non-invited guests also hopped aboard the train. Some people were actually sitting on the coal in the other goods wagons, and those without tickets just attached themselves in any which way they could, which, as we'll find out later, wasn't the best idea. The train Locomotion No. 1 was around 90 tonnes, containing those invited guests, the non-invited guests, and coal and flour. There were apparently up to 600 people aboard that train, although nobody knows the full figure. During the journey, they reached an average speed, it's an almighty amount, of 4 miles per hour, although at some downhill sections they did make it as high as 15 miles an hour. Quite reasonably, the driver of the locomotive was George Stephenson himself, with his brothers James and Ralph being the firemen for that journey. Somewhat amusingly for those of us familiar with modern railways, the train was actually preceded by a man on horseback carrying a warning flag, much like the early cars would have some years later, except without the horse. Before we have a look round and see what the station here at Shildon is like today, I will just say this is not the original station from 1825, but we will be going and having a little look at where that station was in a little while. The station here was actually rebuilt in 2003 to add ramps and also for the building of Locomotion, the museum nearby. Let's have a look round. Let's head up out the station and get a bird's eye view, as it were. As you can see, the station has 2 platforms, complete with that lovely bus shelter style waiting shelter on the Saltburn bound platform. Access between the 2 platforms is via a level ramp and a footbridge that goes over the line. So out here in the car park, we do have a little old railway building.
From up on the road bridge, we can see the Grade 2 listed signal box here at Shildon. This controls the station area as well as the sidings to the museum, Locomotion, and the single track line through Shildon Tunnel to the terminus at Bishop Auckland.
So if you know the area, you're probably thinking, why is she walking away from Locomotion, the railway museum? Surely that's the original station. But it's not. Locomotion is actually built on the site of some old sidings. The site of the original station is actually in the opposite direction, and I'd like to thank my friend Simon Trains for providing me with this information. Love the name of this industrial estate. We've got a ceremonial gate from London Euston Station on the way to the site of the original Shildon station, and another one. On this roundabout we've got one of the old semaphore signals, complete with some train wheels. Over here we've got a restored semaphore signal from Shildon Wagon and Coach Works. So here we are looking at the site of Mason's Arms Crossing and the site of the original Shildon station, where the journey started. As you can see, the spot is occupied by this sadly derelict building and what has been a revamped public footpathy area. There are information signs, but those on the other side of the road are actually fenced off. I'm just reading in this information sign that these stone blocks supported the metal rails of the Stockton and Darlington Railway. And here we've got an image of the Mason's Arms keeper's cabin in the 50s. Now though, after that little visit to the site of the original Shildon station, it's time to head off back to the modern Shildon station to get my next train of the day. I've only got about 15 minutes to get there.
Aycliffe is Northern Train 2. Next station stop is Newton Aycliffe.
We've made it to Newton Aycliffe. So Newton Aycliffe is the newest station I'll be visiting today. It only opened in 1978, but it is on the original route of the Stockton and Darlington Railway. It was known for a long time as Cimpasture Junction, because this was where the junction with the Clarence Railway was when that opened in 1829. And that was the first experience of competition in railway history, because the Stockton and Darlington Railway used to charge quite high fees for coal and goods going onto the Clarence Railway line. Interestingly, I've just found out that the line between Shildon and Newport near Middlesbrough was electrified in 1915 to help with moving large quantities of coal. It's kind of crazy to me because there's only diesel on this line now. It almost feels like we're taking a step backwards. So, as its name suggests, Newton Aycliffe is actually quite a new town. In the Second World War, in 1940, there was a munitions factory opened here. That closed in 1947, and the buildings were converted to an industrial estate, and there were plans to build a new town, Newton Aycliffe, and that's grown ever since, to the extent they felt the need to open the station in 1978. So here at Newton Aycliffe, there's just the two platforms. As you can see, very basic. So they've got these little literary extract things at the station. And I think my favourite one is this poem, because I want to know the backstory for it. Is this based on real life? I have discovered this sign for the locomotion way, so you can walk between Shildon and Newton Aycliffe if you wish to. It's 2 miles, so that's about a 40-minute walk. Okay, so we've got a bus stop here, but there's no buses at all. So one thing to know about Newton Aycliffe is the only access between the two platforms is over a stepped footbridge, and that's the only access to the Bishop Auckland bound platform. So if you need level access, you're fine when it comes to going in the direction of Saltburn, but not if you want to go to Bishop Auckland. Now though, I'm going to have a little walk to Cimpasture Park. At the entrance to Cimpasture Park, we have a blank sign, and here it is, Cimpasture Park. It is a park. It is an open space. It is called Cimpasture. Yes, the only reason I came here is because the original area of Newton Aycliffe Station was Cimpasture Junction, and this is called Cimpasture, and there we go. That was my reasoning. It's also on Pease Way, so after that stalwart of the Stockton and Darlington Railway, Edward Pease. We can go back to the station now.
welcome aboard this northern train to Super. Next station stop is Heighington.
We have made it to Heighington. Now I do apologise if I'm pronouncing that wrong. The announcements on the train do tend to mumble it a bit, so it's like it's Heighington. So Heighington, I'm not sure. Let's go with Heighington. One very key thing I noticed when getting off the train at Heighington is that there is a massive jump down, which leads me to a very important thing at this station. It's a Harrington hump. There's one on each platform. So Heighington Station didn't actually open on the day of that first journey on the Stockton and Darlington Railway on the 27th September 1825. But 11 days earlier, it was here that locomotion number 1 was set on the tracks, ready for some trials. So when locomotion was brought here, it was actually drawn by horses on wagons along what we now know as the A1. So sort of the old method of goods and passenger transport hauling in the new. Unfortunately, when it came down to it, nobody had any means of lighting the boiler on the locomotive. George Stephenson actually sent somebody to Aycliffe to get a lit lamp so that he could light the boiler. However, in the meantime, a navigational engineer by the name of Robert Metcalfe offered his burning glass that he used to light his pipe to Stephenson to light the boiler. Now, burning glass is a piece of glass that is used to, well, focus light and light people's pipes and such like, because it was another 2 years before the friction match was actually invented. Interestingly enough, the friction match itself was invented by John Walker from Stockton in 1827. The station itself here was constructed in 1826 and opened in 1827 to meet demand for passenger facilities, and it's the first wayside railway station to have been opened by a railway company. The station was originally called Aycliffe Lane, being changed to Aycliffe and Heighington in 1847. It was renamed again in 1871 to Aycliffe and again in 1874 to Heighington. The Grade 2 listed signal box here was opened by the North Eastern Railway in 1872, and it's thought that only 4 predate it. The original mechanism was changed in 1906 and extended in 1912, and it was actually still in operation until 2007 when it was assessed for being a listed building. Unfortunately, there was a tragedy here involving locomotion number 1. The water pumper, Edward Turnbull, at the station was sadly wounded, and more tragically, the driver of locomotion number 1, John Cree, was killed. It turns out he had tied down the arm of the safety valve that had caused the pressure in the boiler to go up and subsequently explode. The original 1826 to 27 buildings are now Grade 2 star listed, and there's a cobbled area outside a pub that is thought to be part of the original 1825 platform, but we're going to go and have a look round and see if we can find that. So as you can see, the station as it is today has 2 staggered platforms. Whilst there was semaphore signalling here in the past, it has been replaced by colour light signalling. And there is that lovely signal box. We've got one of my favourite features of any station, a level crossing. So the 1826-27 buildings over here are the oldest station buildings still in existence at a working station, although these are no longer in railway use. So I couldn't find the pub I talked about, but on this sign that says Safe Heighington Station, I can see at the top it says the locomotion number 1. This old building, one of the old railway buildings, was a pub, but now no longer is, as you can tell. So over on the Bishop Auckland bound platform, we've got a better view of those old railway buildings from 1826-27. It's no longer a pub, but there's still a view of the cobbled area that I mentioned earlier. So over there is what's thought to be part of the old platform at the station. So the barriers have gone down, no alarm interestingly. So there's going to be a train coming through, and that'll be the train to Bishop Auckland. Interested in the fact that there's no alarm. There's lights, but there's no alarm. Here, back over on the Saltburn side, you've got a different view of that cobbled area. Now back over on the Saltburn side, we have just got a little wait until our next train, which is going to take us to North Road.
Stockton aboard this northern train to Shildon. The next station stop is Thornaby.
We have made it to North Road.
The current North Road station is the second station to open in Darlington. The original Darlington station, from the time of the opening of the Stockton and Darlington Railway, stood east of the bridge over North Road. The first journey of the Stockton and Darlington Railway reached Darlington at 12 p.m, having taken 2 hours to travel 9 miles. There had been 3 stops along the way, 2 due to a wagon slipping off the rails and ultimately being uncoupled from the train and shunted into a siding. The other stoppage was at Simpasture Junction and was caused by some oakum, a type of rope made of tarred fibres, getting into the feed pump of the locomotive, which George Stephenson was able to quickly fix. At Darlington, where the train was welcomed by around 10,000 people, 6 wagons of coal were detached from the train to be distributed to the poor of the area, and 23 of the wagons containing workmen were also detached and taken to the depot, where they were treated to a good dinner. Added to the train were 2 wagons containing the Yarm Band of Mr. Meynell. Plenty of people alighted the train at Darlington, with plenty more climbing aboard for the journey to Stockton. The current North Road station was originally opened on this site in 1842 and has been expanded and rebuilt on multiple occasions, including when a line opened in 1856 to Barnard Castle and in 1864 and 1876 by the North Eastern Railway. North Road Station began to decline after the opening of the mainline station known as Bank Top in 1887. These days we know that station as just plain old Darlington. North Road itself had a few name changes over the years, originally opening as Darlington, then renamed to Darlington North Road in 1868, and again to North Road in 1934. Surviving 2 threats to close the station, once in 1930 and again during the Beeching cuts, the line through the station was reduced to a single track as branch lines closed. The train shed at North Road fell victim to vandalism by the 1970s, but the station and Hopetown Works complex were restored as a museum, now known as Hopetown, with a single platform remaining in use. Hopetown is an absolutely wonderful museum that I heartily recommend visiting. The entrance to the museum and cafe are housed in the old goods station, with the old passenger station being the main part of the museum. The museum is great, with something for everybody. It's wonderfully interactive, including making your own shares certificate for the Stockton and Darlington Railway. I don't care if that's supposed to be for kids, I made myself one anyway. I even had a go at structuring a railway line, and I think I did reasonably well. You can also see some of the strange excuses people gave for not wanting a railway, like this one about women. Let's have a little wander round.
At North Road Station, hoping beyond hope that my train to Thornaby is going to show up soon, but there's been a points failure at Dinsdale. A couple of later trains have been cancelled, and the train heading up the line to Bishop Auckland is about 50 minutes late. Oh, it's just pulling in though. So the train to Bishop Auckland, having gone nearly an hour late, hopefully means that the train to Saltburn is now coming through, because I need to get to Thornaby. So the train to Saltburn should have got in at 14:49. It is now 3:05. This is making it extremely tight for my changeover at Thornaby to get the train to Stockton, to the extent I would say it's making that pretty much impossible now, unless the train shows up magically in like 30 seconds. So the dot matrix display now just says delayed rather than estimated time, and there's no updates on real-time trains. I've got no idea how long I'm going to be here. I was hoping to do a little secondary trip today and maybe go to Saltburn by the sea, but I think that plan may have to be shelved for another time. So I finally made it to Thornaby, over an hour later than planned, but we are here in time to get a connection to Stockton. So I'm going to hand over to narration Sarah for a bit of history of this station, just because that was surprisingly tiring waiting to get here.
The station was originally opened as Stockton South by the North Eastern Railway in 1882 on an extension of the Stockton and Darlington Railway to Port Darlington. It was renamed to Thornaby in 1892 when Parliament created the borough of Thornaby-on-Tees. Being on a busy section of the line, the station was well equipped with extensive goods sidings as well as cattle pens, an extremely busy signal box, and even some nearby urinals for your convenience. During the Second World War, the station was damaged by a bomb falling nearby, but the damage done to the station wasn't repaired. After staff were removed from the station in the 1970s, the station buildings fell victim to vandalism, and British Rail made the decision to demolish the buildings in December 1981. The station was left without buildings until a £500,000 refurbishment took place, with the rebuilt station being opened in 2003. Several proposals have been put forward over the years to rename the station. British Rail proposed to rename it to Stockton in 1988 and 1994, and Northern Spirit proposed to name it South Stockton in 2000. Needless to say, these attempts at renaming were stopped by the protests of people from the local area.
we have made it to Stockton. So the station we're standing in now was opened in 1852 by the Leeds Northern Railway, and shortly afterwards it was renamed from Stockton-on-Tees to North Stockton. Then in November 1892, when the station was rebuilt on the same site, it was renamed to Stockton-on-Tees and renamed a final time in 1985 to just plain Stockton.
The opening of Stockton Station was part of the Leeds Northern Railway's decision to extend northward from Melmerby to Stockton and Billingham-on-Tees via North Allerton. Stockton Station would also indirectly serve the Clarence Railway lines from Ferry Hill and St Pasture Junction via Carlton, which is later known as Red Marshall, that joined the Leeds Northern line at Norton, as well as the North Eastern Railway's route to Wellfield, which opened in 1880. Trains on the Wellfield route were withdrawn in November 1931 and the Ferry Hill service ceased in 1952.
So now we've had that little history of the current Stockton station. It's time I mentioned this isn't the station where the Stockton and Darlington Railway came to on that very first journey. That was a different station, and we're going to have to go and have a little walk to find that.
A large amount of people turned out to welcome the train on the inaugural journey of the Stockton and Darlington Railway, and there's a story of at one point the stagecoach bound for Stockton travelling parallel to the train, the old and the new being compared side by side for a few moments. The stagecoach only held 16 passengers, but the train was said to be carrying anything up to 700, with all the people who had decided to attach themselves to the train as uninvited guests. These days we'd call them fare dodgers. As the train headed towards Stockton, the gradient allowed the train to pick up speed, and it reached the speed of 15 miles per hour. Unfortunately, there was a passenger hanging on the outside of a wagon who fell, and his foot was crushed by the following vehicle. As works to the section of the line to the quayside were still ongoing, the journey ended at a temporary terminus at St John's Well, which is where we're heading to now. The train was greeted with a 21-gun salute and cheering from the assembled crowds. Mr Meynell's band, who had joined the train at Darlington, struck up the national anthem and led the 102 invited guests to dinner at the town hall, where it said there were no less than 23 toasts and the party didn't disperse until 11 p.m. We've now reached that spot known as St John's Well, where that first journey ended. The original station here at Stockton operated until 1848 and is commemorated with a plaque on the side of the building. It's Grade 2 listed and is now in private use. From that first journey of the Stockton and Darlington Railway on that autumn day 200 years ago, railways have grown and evolved, and the world has changed because of them. The ability to travel meant people could work outside of the communities they were born into, goods could be transported far and wide quicker than before, and things we take for granted today, such as holidays at the seaside, would become possible for ordinary people. It's not too fanciful to say that our way of life today may not have been possible without the railways. The coming of the railways really did change the world.
So, having discovered from looking at maps that it is actually quite a bit of a shorter walk to get from the site of the old Stockton station to Thornaby than it is to go to Stockton, I decided I'm just going to walk to Thornaby. I don't really have the energy to go all the way back to Stockton just to get a train to Thornaby to change to get back to Darlington. I really hope you've enjoyed this video celebrating 200 years of public railways in this country. I'll see you all next time for another railway adventure. Bye.
As always, an extra special thank you to all of my patrons and channel members whose names are on screen now, as well as everybody who donates to me on Ko-fi. You all keep this channel going.
1 will be the 1832 Northern Service to Shildon via Darlington.